A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the list.
Hello and welcome to The Case For, a Baseball Hall of Fame podcast. I'm your host, attorney and baseball fan extraordinaire Russell Christian. On each episode of this podcast, I examine a different Major League Baseball player's career, and I make the case for whether I believe the player does or does not deserve enshrinement in the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum in Cooperstown, New York. If you're someone who spends the baseball offseason meticulously following all of the Baseball Hall of Fame news and announcements, only to find yourself facing an existential crisis of what to do with yourself once the announcements are over and you realize there's still 2 months until opening day, then welcome to the void, my friends. This is the podcast for you. Have no fear, of course, there are many of us out here in the void, and you will find camaraderie, and two of those are people who I want to feature on today's Superfan Shoutout section. There's a theme to today's Superfan Shoutout, and that is respectful and open dialogue. Our country can be so divided at times. It's a good practice to try and engage in conversations with respect, even if you don't agree with each other. In that spirit, I want to highlight two fans with whom I've recently had some great interactions and conversations on Twitter X, in which we ultimately didn't agree on what we were discussing, but we nevertheless had some great interactions and conversations, and I, for one, walked away learning a few valuable lessons that I didn't know before the conversations. So, first is Twitter X user at KirbyDillon4. He's one of the hosts of the Throwing Partners Pod. Great baseball podcast, so go check that out if you haven't already. Kirby recently jumped in the comments section of a Twitter X post in which I critiqued the Hall of Fame case of Chase Utley. And Kirby pointed out that Chase had 5 seasons of a B-WAR higher than 7. A great debate ensued, and upon deeper investigation, I realized that this is a significant stat indeed, and I actually reposted his comment with a list of players who had 5 or more seasons with a B-WAR higher than 7. It's a very exclusive list. You can go on my Twitter X account and find that. And I think that may be one of Utley's strongest arguments in favor of the Hall of Fame. One of the best arguments I've heard to date. So thank you, Kirby, for the talk and the stats. I always love interacting with fans. Even if we don't ultimately agree, I do enjoy the debate and the mutual respect and professionalism. So thanks for listening and engaging, Kirby. And to my listeners out there, go check out the Throwing Partners Pod, a great baseball podcast. Another super fan with whom I've recently had a good conversation in which we didn't necessarily agree, but nevertheless had a respectful, intelligent, and fun conversation was Twitter X user at Orwellian, who labels herself a, quote, baseball generalist, Ohtani enthusiast, and 1983 media and global post-punk devotee, which is just the kind of eclectic fan base that I set out to capture when I started this podcast. I love music, I love baseball, so thanks for listening. You probably noticed from my prior episodes, especially my Dan Byrne interview, I'm a huge fan of music, and I enjoy spicing up my baseball conversation with occasional topical intellectualism, and recently at Orwellian and I got into a good conversation about automation and old world production mechanisms as it relates to Kentucky bourbon production, as well as some artificial intelligence discussions. So, good talk. I look forward to more such talks with my fans in the future. You can find me on Twitter, X, and Blue Sky, so shoot me a message. I'm always here to talk on a variety of issues. Now, if you're not into automation methods, AI, and the bourbon industry, that's fine. If you're more into just straight up baseball talk, have no fear, because our 23rd episode and the finale of Season 2 is going to be a great episode. I'm going to recap the 2025 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot vote and give a preview of the 2026 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot as well. As you may have noticed at the beginning of this episode, this is also the 3rd straight episode, and possibly the final, we'll see, in which I'm using superfan Dan Byrne's song, That's the List, as my episode music. And again, I cannot thank Dan enough for that amazing contribution to this podcast. So thanks again, Dan. And without further ado, let's recap the 2025 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot and preview the 2026 Baseball Writers Association of America ballot.
That's your 2025 Hall of Fame ballot. I'd give a nod to Ichiro, probably Sabathia, maybe Billy Wagner, possibly Beltran. It's looking like A-Rod and Manny will go the way of Bonds and Clemens. In other words, no.
All right, love that song. So glad we got to use it on a few episodes of this podcast, and thank you again, Dan Byrne. Unless you've been living in a cave the last few weeks, you probably know by now that the Baseball Writers Association of America recently elected 3 new members to the Hall of Fame: Ichiro Suzuki, CC Sabathia, and Billy Wagner. Now, if you have been living in a cave for the last several weeks, and your first order of business upon emerging from your isolation is not to request water or a cheeseburger, but to listen to my podcast, then thank you and welcome. I will tell you right now the voting percentages for these players. Ichiro Suzuki received 393 votes for 99.7% of the vote, and on his first year on the ballot, only one writer didn't vote for Ichiro Suzuki. We'll get into that in 1 second. CC Sabathia received 342 votes for 86.8% on his first year in the ballot, and Billy Wagner, in his 10th and final year in the ballot, received 325 votes for 82.5% of the votes. As you know, you need to receive 75% or more of the votes on the Baseball Writers ballot in order to get inducted into the Hall of Fame on the Baseball Writers ballot. So right out of the gate, I want to congratulate Ichiro, CC, and Billy on their election of the Hall of Fame. It's a huge and well-deserved honor. I briefly broke down Ichiro and CC's Hall of Fame cases on episode 22, and Billy Wagner got his own episode 5. If you're a Billy Wagner fan, you haven't listened to that, go give that a listen. And I also gave Billy some further breakdowns on episodes 12, 13, and 22, so definitely give those a listen. If you haven't listened, I'll just say it. Look, initially I said that Billy would not get my vote on the basis of his lackluster postseason performance, but after thinking about it and reflecting upon it, I do think it's a bit unfair to critique him for 11.2 innings of postseason play in a career that otherwise lasted 16 years and for which he's 8th all-time in career saves and the 2nd most all-time in career saves amongst left-handed pitchers behind John Franco. I provided these vote totals above because in recent years, with the rise of the internet and Hall of Fame trackers, such as the one by the great Ryan Thibodeau at Not Mr. Tibbs, people generally have an idea of how the voting is going to break down before the results come. And with the recent unanimous election of Mariano Rivera, it's become a topic of conversation every year whether or not a player is going to get in unanimously or not. I do think it's an interesting side note, and while I posted some jokes on my social media like a lot of us did about who the person was that didn't vote for Ichiro, ultimately I do agree with the opinions of some people online, such as podcast superfan at The Warmonger, who recently had a great and poetic post saying, kind of some ways doesn't matter, and in a lot of ways really distracts from the prestige of the moment. I tend to agree. There was a video of a reporter asking Ichiro, what he thought about the one person that didn't vote, what he would say to the person. And Ichiro, being, one of the classiest guys in baseball, said, I'm paraphrasing here, I would invite him over to my house and, have a talk with him. And he's not going to say anything bad about the guy. So, it is a bit distracting. Let the guy enjoy the moment. And at the end of the day, kind of who cares? But the flip side to this is that voting is what gets you in, especially borderline candidates. So it is important to know, who votes, who they vote for. And for borderline candidates, the vote totals do matter because there's a lot of guys who barely, got in or barely just didn't get in. So with that in mind, speaking of these borderline candidates, let's take a look here. Let's get right into it at who did not get in this year and their vote totals. Most important here, Carlos Beltran got 70.3% of the vote, so just about 5% short of that 75% in his 3rd year on the ballot. Also, Andrew Jones in his 8th year on the ballot was 66.2. Those are the 2 big near misses this year. Then you had, just briefly, Chase Utley, A-Rod, Manny, Andy Pettitte, Felix Hernandez, Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, Dustin Pedroia, Mark Burley, Francisco Rodriguez, David Wright, and Torrey Hunter. Those guys all got 5% or more, so all those guys stay on the ballot. And that gets me to the point here. Well, let's talk about the players who received less than 5% of the vote. If you know from my prior podcasts or from reading about this, if you don't get 5% or more of the vote on the Baseball Writers ballot, you're kicked off the ballot. And a lot of players appear in the first year and don't get 5%, and they are known collectively by the unfortunate nomenclature of one-and-dones. So this year's one-and-dones are as follows. I'm not going to read their vote totals because they're all less than 5%. Just a list of names here. Guys that showed up this year on the ballot for the first time, didn't get 5%, and now they are off the Baseball Writers ballot permanently. That's Ian Kinsler, Russell Martin, Brian McCann, Troy Tulowitzki, Curtis Granderson, Adam Jones, Carlos Gonzalez, Hanley Ramirez, Fernando Rodney, and Ben Zobrist. So what that means is they can't appear on any future Baseball Writers Association of America ballots. They are eligible in the future on what we call the Veterans Committee, and now they call them the Era Committee's ballots. So, there's hope, but it's a long time coming. And as we've seen with Dave Parker and Dick Allen, who were recently elected, that they were elected years after they retired, and in Dick Allen's case, after he passed away. So it's not impossible for any of these guys to make the Hall of Fame. I don't think that they really have good cases, but, crazier things have happened. The one that really surprised me as a one and done, though, I will say, was Brian McCann. I talked about him on my last episode. And I was reiterated, during his first 9 seasons with the Braves, there was a lot of times when I felt like he was on or almost on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And then when he signed with the Yankees, I thought, man, he's just a few big seasons or maybe some big playoff moments away from a Hall of Fame discussion, at least, if not, a consensus that he's a Hall of Famer. As it turned out, his years in New York, although they weren't necessarily complete bust, but they definitely weren't what was expected. And, he ended up getting traded over to the Astros. And although he did have a few last seasons with the Astros and Braves, including his lone World Series ring in 2017, he never really attained that Hall of Fame status in the minds of many voters. He did have a great career, and I think he's got good enough stats to at least have a conversation. So I'm really bummed, and also personally because I'm a Braves fan, I like McCann, but I'm really bummed that he's a one and done. I don't necessarily think he's a Hall of Famer, but I think he's someone that had an interesting and compelling enough case to at least stick around the ballot. I'd like to have the conversation. Now the conversation's over, at least for the time being. But that doesn't mean that the Hall of Fame is forever closed to Brian. I will say it's not unprecedented to get in. Hall of Fame catcher Ted Simmons was a one and done on his first Baseball Writers Association of America ballot in 1994. If you go back, that was a brutal ballot that elected only Steve Carlton and left 12 future Hall of Famers on the Baseball Writers ballot. Now, for what it's worth, Simmons had a much higher career WAR than McCann. Simmons had a career WAR of 50.4 compared to McCann's career WAR of 32. So that's a huge jump in WAR for Simmons, which probably helped his case. But otherwise, if you look at their career stats, I think there's some give and take as far as their career accounting stats and hardware. I'm going to post that comp on my social media. You can take a look and let me know your thoughts. Am I just crazy here, or is there something to this? And do you think McCann will eventually make it in the Hall of Fame one day? Who knows? I'll just give my elevator pitch for Brian McCann because I'm a Braves fan. And I also think, objectively, he was someone that was almost on a trajectory and has a compelling case to at least not be a one and done. Brian is one of only 6 catchers in Major League Baseball history to record 12,000 or more putouts. He's 6th all-time in putouts for catchers, just ahead of Hall of Famer Gary Carter at number 7. He also has more career putouts in catcher than Hall of Famers Carlton Fisk, Mike Piazza, and Johnny Bench. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And McCann was a World Series champ in 2017, a 7-time All-Star, a 6-time Silver Slugger, 2010 All-Star Game MVP. He had 282 career home runs. It's 8th most all-time for a catcher. I'll say this too. This is kind of another elevator pitch for him. Among those 6 catchers with 12,000 or more career putouts, Brian has the highest career OPS plus at 110. Brian and Ivan Rodriguez are the only 2 of those catchers with over 200 home runs. Brian's got 282, almost 300. So of those 6, Brian is second in career OPS, slugging, and on-base percentage, as well as second in Pudge to Silver Sluggers awarded. So at the end of the day, I'm still not 100% convinced he's a Hall of Famer. He's definitely a borderline case. But I think he's worth the conversation, and I think Brian was more deserving of the one and done, of being on the ballot. I don't think he was deserving of the one and done treatment. But anyway, you can disagree with me. If you have some thoughts, let me know on my Twitter X or my Blue Sky. As for these other guys that were the one and dones, really the only one I think of that really had a good argument to stay on the ballot was Ian Kinsler. He has the highest WAR of the one and dones with a really impressive 54.1 WAR. That's B WAR. I always use B WAR, Baseball Reference WAR. But otherwise, his counting stats fall short. I went over in the last episode, under 2,000 hits, 1,243 runs, that's good, but 257 home runs, less than 1,000 RBI, career batting average of 269. His counting stats aren't really going to get you in the Hall of Fame. He's 4th-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove, won a 2018 World Series with the Red Sox, had a monster ALDS that season. had two 30-30 seasons, is one of only 16 players in Major League Baseball history to do so. Also one of 6 players in Major League Baseball history to get 6 hits in a game while hitting for the cycle. So definitely a good career, great resume. And, the WAR is impressive, but ultimately, I think Kinsler is not a Hall of Famer, and a lot of people agreed, and he's a one and done. So, good player, but I don't see him getting a push anytime soon on the Era Committee ballots, especially because there's just a lot of competition. So, if you disagree with me, let me know. Another one here on the list, Russell Martin. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I know he's a sentimental favorite amongst a lot of fans, especially Dodgers fans, for a lot of the same reasons as McCann. Martin was a catcher. Look, fans love catchers, and traditionally, I think a lot of fans and voters have been willing to look beyond traditional stats to take into account their defense, leadership, and overall perception as being the field general of a team. So catchers, I think, voters, I think, are willing to take into effect a lot more intangibles than other positions. But all that being said, I just don't think Martin hit any of the career numbers that are going to get him the Hall of Fame, even as a catcher. Good player, though. 38.8 WAR, 803 runs, 1,416 hits, 191 home runs, but a career 248 batting average. These are good numbers. Batting average is low for the Hall of Fame. 4-time All-Star, won a Silver Slugger and a Golden Glove. Good career, good resume. Don't think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, though. So the last player I want to say among the one-and-dones that I think probably at least had a shot of sticking around the ballot was, believe it or not, Adam Jones. He's a 5-time All-Star. I said this in my last episode. He had 7 seasons of 25 or more home runs and 8 seasons of 70 or more RBI. He also won 4 Gold Gloves and a Silver Slugger. Look, I think if he collected all those stats and hardware while playing middle infield or catcher, it'd be a different conversation. But as a center fielder, he's got stiff competition, both in his era and any era. And ultimately, he was a very good player, but I don't think he's ever going to make the Hall of Fame. So anyway, enough about the one and dones. What about the players still on the ballot for next year that I think actually have a chance of getting elected? Really, there's only 2. We talked about a second ago. Let's start with Carlos Beltran. He got 70.3% of the vote in his 3rd year. So I broke down Carlos's Hall of Fame case on episode 10. The elevator pitch for Carlos is he got a career WAR of 70.1. Very impressive. I always say 70 to 75 is that sweet spot. 75 or higher is kind of generally like, get this guy in. 70 to 75 is really good. And he's one of only 4 players with 2,500 or more hits, 400 or more home runs, 300 or more stolen bases, and 1,000 or more walks. Those other 3 players are A-Rod, Bonds, and Mays. So it's just A-Rod, Bonds, Mays, and Beltran in that exclusive club. I mean, that's an elevator pitch right there. Guy was also a 9-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glover, 2-time Silver Slugger, 1999 AL Rookie of the Year, and had an incredible postseason resume, which led to his killer nickname, Señor Octubre, and his lone World Series title with the 2017 Astros. I do think that being part of the Trash Stros, did ding him a little bit. But frankly, that's water over the dam at this point. He's getting beat up a little bit on the votes, but I think he's going to get in, and let's just get it over with because we know Altuve is going to get in eventually. And there's a few other guys from that 2017 Astros that, once their careers are over, I think may have a decent Hall of Fame discussion. So let's just get over that. I think Carlos is going to get in next year in his 4th year on the ballot. Next one up, of course, is Andruw Jones, 66.2% in his 8th year. Next year is going to be his 9th year on the ballot. I break down Andrew's case in detail on episode 8, and his elevator pitch is that he's one of only 4 players to have won 10 Gold Gloves and have 400 more career home runs, and the others are first ballot Hall of Famers Willie Mays, Mike Schmidt, and Ken Griffey Jr. I mentioned that on my Andruw Jones episode, and of course recently MLB shared an infographic with that stat. That's cool, and I know a lot of us are doing the same research and coming up with the same stats. I'm probably not the first guy to mention the 400 career home runs, the 10 Gold Gloves, but MLB, if you're listening to my podcast and that was the inspiration for the infographic, hook me up with a DM or a shout out. That'd be really cool to help grow this podcasting community. So anyway, soapbox over. I do think Andruw will at least get close next year. I hope he gets in. Obviously, I hope he got in this year, but he didn't. I think he's going to get in next year. I think Beltran is for certain, and Andruw is going to be really the borderline case that everyone's going to be looking at. And again, I'll get back on a little bit of a soapbox, do a good PR campaign for Braves country. Hey, guys, if you want to see Andruw in the Hall of Fame, go out and do your thing. Spread the message of Andruw Jones as a Hall of Famer, because I want to tell you guys something or predict something that might be incredibly awesome. Okay, as I said before, it's very possible that Dale Murphy will be on the December 2025 Era Committee ballot. And Andrew's definitely going to be on the January 20 2026 baseball writers ballot. So hear me out here. You see where I'm going with this. There's a possibility that both Dale Murphy and Andruw Jones, both former Braves center fielders, can get elected and inducted into Cooperstown in the same summer. And the fact that that is a possibility has me more excited than you can possibly even imagine. So if you're a Braves fan listening to this, let's make it happen, Braves fans. Spread the good news about Andruw. Go out on social media. Tell everyone. Shout it from the rooftops. You think Andruw Jones and Dale Murphy's a Hall of Famer. And if you're shouting out about Dale Murphy, make sure you use that hashtag Year of Dale Murphy. I'm spreading that. I want Dale to get in this year. I got a feeling it's going to be the year of Dale Murphy. So hashtag Year of Dale Murphy. Let's get Andruw and Dale Murphy into the Hall of Fame, and let's go up and have a huge Braves party in Cooperstown in the summer of 2026. All right. The only remaining players who received 25% or more on the vote in this year's ballot were Chase Utley, A-Rod, Manny, and Andy Pettitte. Now, briefly, next year's going to be Manny's last on the ballot. He got 34.3% of the vote this year, so he's nowhere near the 75%. I think it's fair to say that PEDs are going to keep him out next year and probably for a long time, if not forever. And same thing with A-Rod. A-Rod got 37.1% of the vote in his fourth year. So I think PED is going to keep these guys out, as well as Pettitte. He got 27.9%. This is his seventh year on the ballot. So what does all this mean? I think this bodes well for Utley. I don't see him getting in next year. I mean, I could be wrong. Crazier things have happened. But Chase Utley got 39.8% of the vote in his second year. So next year will be his third year. I'll say, look, I think Carlos and Andruw have the best chance, but I don't think that Chase is going to get in next year. But the good news for both Chase Utley, Carlos, and Andruw Jones is that I think they have a really good chance of getting in next year, at least Carlos and Andruw, and I think Chase has a good chance of getting his vote total up next year because, I'll just be honest, you've probably seen a lot of this on social media. The newcomers to the 2026 ballot really don't move the needle, in my opinion. This brings me to kind of the final part of the episode. Let's talk about the list of newcomers to the 2026 baseball writers ballot. Upon first glance, I'm going to be honest, I don't see any players that I think are Hall of Famers, let alone first ballot Hall of Famers. And judging by a lot of the comments and posts on social media, a lot of you guys agree with me. Let's break this down real quick. The newcomers to the 2026 baseball writers ballot are Ryan Braun, Shin-Soo Choo, Edwin Encarnacion, Gio Gonzalez, Alex Gordon, Cole Hamels, Matt Kemp, Howie Kendrick, Nick Markakis, Daniel Murphy, Hunter Pence, Rick Porcello, and Neil Walker. Again, I don't see any Hall of Famers on that list, and certainly not any first ballot Hall of Famers, which bodes well for, the emphasis is going to be on Beltran and Andruw. I think the two of them, it's their induction to lose next year. Utley, I think because there's not this strong class 26, is going to gain some momentum. I don't think he's going to get in next year. In terms of these guys in 2026, let's focus on them. The guys who are getting the most hype so far are Braun and Hamels. Braun, of course, had the infamous 2013 PED suspension, so I think it's fair to say he's going to get the Manny and A-Rod treatment. And considering that, Manny and A-Rod have significantly better stats than Ryan Braun, I just don't see Ryan Braun getting in on the baseball writers ballot. And I'm calling it now. He may be a one and done next year because of the PEDs and because even with PEDs, his career stats, if you're going to start putting him in the PED camp, you're putting him up there with Manny, A-Rod, the Bonds, McGuires. It's like his stats don't even remotely compare to those guys. So I'm calling it now. I think he's going to be a one and done. And that really only leaves Hamels as the only serious contender to pick up some Hall of Fame votes next year. I think he's got a decent argument. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I definitely don't see him as a first ballot Hall of Famer. You can disagree with me. Share your thoughts online if you disagree. Cole Hamels is a four-time All-Star, career 59 WAR, 163 wins, 2,560 strikeouts, and a 3.43 ERA. He threw a no-hitter and was part of a combined no-hitter. And, of course, he tore up the 2008 postseason, winning the NLCS and World Series MVP awards en route to the Phillies World Series title. If you're a Phillies fan, you're probably like, oh, yeah, heck yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. I disagree. Great pitcher, great career, but in my humble opinion, I don't think he has the career stats or the hardware to merit induction into Cooperstown, and certainly not in his first year. The only other players, in my opinion, that really have a chance of getting even 5% or more of the vote are as follows: Edwin Encarnacion, Alex Gordon, Nick Markakis and Hunter Pence. Again, I don't think these guys are Hall of Famers. I don't think they're going to get in, but I think they have the strongest chance of at least surviving the one-and-done treatment. Encarnacion, guy's got 424 home runs, 1,261 RBIs. He had 8 seasons of 30 or more home runs. Ultimately, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but I think he's got impressive enough career stats to have a shot of surviving being a one-and-done. Same with Alex Gordon, 8-time Gold Glove winner, 2-time Platinum Glove winner in the outfield, but otherwise his career stats fall significantly short, especially considering he's an outfielder. So, the hardware might get him a few votes. He might survive being a one-and-done, but I don't think he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. And that brings us to 2 others here. Nick Markakis, kind of like McCann. I'm a Braves fan. Markakis was on the Orioles, then he was on the Braves. He was someone, he had a 15-year career, 2,388 hits, he had 514 doubles, it's 54th all-time, more than Babe Ruth. Actually, more than Freddie Freeman has after his 15th year. And there's a lot of talk now, if Freddie stays healthy, he could threaten the all-time doubles record if he stays healthy. So Freddie's a doubles machine. Markakis has more doubles in his career after 15 years than Freeman has after 15 years. Kind of interesting. Not necessarily saying Markakis is a Hall of Famer, but kind of like Brian McCann, just feels like yesterday, as a Braves fan, I was following Markakis' career with an eye towards, is this guy going to be Cooperstown worthy? And there was a brief point before he retired where it looked like if he, signed a deal and stuck around for a few more years, that he might actually have had a shot at the Hall of Fame had he kept playing and pushed his career hit and double total further. But Father Time comes for us all, and as a result, I think he's a very good player, but not a Hall of Famer. I know the what-if game's a slippery slope, but the career doubles really would have pushed his case up. Just for fun, had he hypothetically played one more full season and obtained 30 doubles, which is 9 less than his career average. He averaged 39 doubles a season in his career. If he played one more year and got 30 doubles, that would have placed him at 544 career doubles, tying him with Derek Jeter for 35th all-time, and one more than Tony Gwynn's career total for doubles. But as it stands, again, this is a slippery slope, the what-if game. We have to take Nick's stats as they are. Good player, but not a Hall of Famer. Again, and you can call him a compiler, but if he had stuck around 2, 3, 4, 5 more seasons and got his career hit total, definitely got that career doubles total, then that would have been the elevator pitch. He could have placed himself pretty highly on that all-time career doubles list. Would have improved his Hall of Fame pitch, but 15 years, good career, good player, good hitter, not a Hall of Famer. Finally, the only one I think that has a chance of maybe surviving a one-and-done is Hunter Pence, simply because he was a fan favorite, 2 times World Series champ with the Giants, but ultimately I think his career stats fall short. I do think he's going to get a lot of love from West Coast writers, and I think that might keep him above 5%, but I just don't see him getting much more than that, and I don't see him as a Hall of Famer. So, briefly to recap, it doesn't appear to me that any of the 2026 ballot newcomers are really going to make a noticeable splash with the voters, apart from Hamels, which is a good sign for Beltran and Jones, who I think are going to both get in 2026. And it's going to be a watershed year for Utley. If he trends upward significantly, gets a big jump in his vote total, then Utley might have a shot of getting in one day on the baseball writers ballot. If he stays around the same or actually declines in his vote totals, then I think he's going to be in trouble on the baseball writers ballot. So the 2026 is going to be a key year for Chase Utley. The thing about the 2026 class is it relates to Utley and also to Andruw Jones. 2026 I don't see as a strong class. And some of you might disagree, I don't see 2027 as a particularly strong class. The 2 big newcomers to the 2027 class are Buster Posey and John Lester. Which means for the next 2 years, Chase Utley, if he's going to get on the baseball writers ballot, it's going to be in the next 2 years. Same with Beltran and Jones. Beltran's looking like he's going to get it next year. Jones, I really hope gets in next year. But here's the thing, in 2028 and 2029, you've got 2 stacked ballots. So if Utley's not in by then, he's going to get lost in the wave here. Because just listen to this. 2028, you've got Albert Pujols, Robinson Cano, and Yadier Molina getting on the ballot. I don't think Cano gets in the first ballot, but he's certainly going to get a lot of votes. Pujols and Yadi are going to get in first ballot. 2029, you've got Miguel Cabrera, Joey Votto, Zach Greinke, Adam Wainwright, and Madison Bumgarner. Mad Bum, excuse me. I don't think Wainwright and Mad Bum are going to get in, but I think they're going to get a lot of votes. I think Miggy and probably Votto are going to get in first ballot. Greinke might get in first ballot. So just 2028, 2029, and briefly, we're looking way ahead. Stack ballots that are going to draw a lot of votes away from Utley if he's still on the ballot. But all that's in the distant future. For the time being, fear not, my friends. Pitchers and catchers report in just a few weeks, and shortly thereafter, we will have some spring training and some games to watch. And remember, opening day of the 2025 baseball season will be here before you know it, with the 2025 Major League Baseball season kicking off March 18th and 19th with a 2-game series between the LA Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs in Tokyo, Japan, which is just going to be absolutely amazing. I cannot wait. Until then, remember, when life gets you down, stop what you're doing, watch a baseball game, or read about the upcoming season, or listen to a podcast about baseball, or listen to a song about baseball. On that note, thank you again, Dan Byrne, for writing this beautiful song that's going to close us out. And we'll let it play out as we conclude Season 2 of the Case for a Baseball Hall of Fame podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and stay tuned for Season 3.
A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the list. That's your 2025 Hall of Fame ballot. I'd give the nod to Ichiro, probably Sabathia, maybe Billy Wagner, possibly Beltran. It's looking like A-Rod and Manny will go the way of Bonds and Clemens. In other words, no. The rest of them were fabulous players, but they got as much chance of getting in the Hall as me. A-Rod, Manny, Ichiro, Pettit, Sabathia, Carlos Beltran, Jimmy Rollins, Omar Vizquel, King, Felix, Chase, Utley, Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Bobby Abreu, Brian McCann, Ian Kinsler, Torrey Hunter, Russell Martin, Mark Burley, Adam Jones, Ben Zobrist, David Wright, Hanley Ramirez, Carlos Gonzalez, Troy Tulowitzki, Dustin Pedroia, Fernando Rodney, Curtis Granderson, Francisco Rodriguez. That's the